Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us. Hello.
Good evening. Good
Evening.
evening.
Good evening.
Hi, everyone. We'll just wait just a couple of minutes. I can see you all streaming in there nicely. Hi, everyone. Thank you.
Good evening.
Number still going up. It's nice to see. Lovely. Right, I think we're just about there. So, good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us, and welcome to the next instalment of the Naturetrek online roadshow. So, my name is Georgie Dodds. I will be your host for this evening. I am joining you from Basingstoke, which is about 20 miles north of our office in Jane Austen's village of Hampshire, and I'm accompanied by a couple of my esteemed colleagues here, who I will introduce very shortly. So yes, this evening we'll be talking to you about Central America, which is a destination which we cover a lot with Nature Trek holidays. A lot of you might remember the virtual road shows that we did during the course of the pandemic in Panama, where we were delighted to go to the Canopy Tower and bring a little bit of brightness to a darker time. So yet again, we hope to bring a bit of brightness to your dark January evening tonight. But for those of you further afield, thank you very much for joining us. We know we have got a lot of international guests joining us as well, so do feel free to say hello, pop your questions and comments in the chat there. And importantly, also please do also put your questions in the Q&A sections in the boxes that we have there. We'll try and answer a few of those as we go along this evening, but we'll also have a dedicated Q&A section at the end of the evening. And we will, we'll answer your questions in more detail then. So in Central America, as I say, we cover a lot of different destinations. We go to Belize, Guatemala, Cuba, all over the Caribbean. But this evening we'll be speaking to you about Costa Rica and Honduras. So first of all, my colleague Paul Stanbury will be speaking to you about Costa Rica. Paul is a stalwart of the Naturetrek office. We were just discussing he's been here for nearly 30 years now. So many of you have probably travelled with Paul yourself, perhaps even to Costa Rica. So we're absolutely delighted to have him in the office here and talking to us this evening. And so Paul will be speaking for about half an hour, and then at about 8 o'clock, my colleague John Moseley will be joining us, and he'll be talking about Honduras. So John is actually relatively new to the Naturetrek staffing team. He works in the tailor-made department with me. But long before he started working on our office, John's been travelling with Naturetrek as one of our guests. So he's been very familiar to us for a long time, and we're delighted to have him on board now. And John's actual most recent pursuit was to Honduras itself. So he's fresh back. Just last month he was there. So we're delighted to have some great first-hand knowledge from John. So that will then take us to the Q&A section, which will end our evening. And then we hope you'll join us for some future online roadshow evenings as well. We've also been delighted to see so many of you in person. During the last few months, as we've been doing our in-person roadshows all over the country. Now we're finally back down south, and on Wednesday we'll be in Winchester. So those of you local to Winchester, do give our reservations team a call if you'd like to join us there, and we'll be in London on Thursday. So we can talk about all of our other destinations that might not be covered this evening. So without further ado, I will pass over to Paul, who will start to talk to you about Costa Rica. Welcome, Paul. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Georgie. Just excuse me one moment while I share my screen. Right, hopefully that all looks okay. Right, well, yes, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us this evening. Yeah, I'm going to be talking for the next half an hour on Costa Rica, one of our most popular destinations, especially post-pandemic. The tours are filling very quickly, which is great. And yeah, it's a fabulous destination full of amazing wildlife. Where is Costa Rica? So Costa Rica is on the narrow isthmus of land between South America and North America and Central America, sandwiched between Panama and Nicaragua. It's home to nearly 950 species of bird. That's more than Canada and America put together. In fact, this tiny country only covers 0.1% of the world's land mass, but holds 5% of its biodiversity. So it's an incredibly rich country, home to a wonderful abundance of birds, mammals, and other wildlife. And so we fly into San Jose, the capital of Costa Rica. We run most of our Costa Rican trips between January to April, which is the dry season in the country, and of course a great time for us to get away from the UK, get away from the cold, wet winter months. And swap that for a bit of nice, warm Central American sunshine. We also run a couple of tours in November, December as well, which is another great time for birding, just at the end of the wetter months of the year. So the main wildlife areas we focus on our tours are outlined on this map here. On the Caribbean side, we've got Tortuguero National Park, Sarapiquí and La Selva. In the center, there's a spine of mountains run north-south through the middle of Costa Rica. And up in the mountains here, we explore the Talamanca Mountains, Monteverde Cloud Forest, Arenal volcano, and the surrounding national park. And on the Pacific side, we're looking at Carrara National Park, Corcovado down in the south, Piedras Blancas National Park, and also La Cruche Biological Centre. But there's plenty of other areas to explore as well. I look after our group tours that we run to the region, where we take a maximum of 10 people. Georgie and John, we're delighted to do a tailor-made trip for you as well. To Costa Rica, so you can explore other areas such as Cano Negro, Manuel Antonio National Park, Palo Verde, and there's numerous other regions to explore too. So the mountains that run down the wildlife in Costa Rica is very much controlled by altitude, and as is the climate as well. You have a different selection of bird life on the Caribbean side of the country to the Pacific side, and also as you go up in elevation up to 11,000 or so feet, which is the higher peaks in the Talamanca Mountains. With all our flights into San Jose, where we try and do direct flights. British Airways fly direct between about November and the end of March. They fly direct from Gatwick. At other times of the year, you have to go indirect. We try not to fly via America because it's a bit of a pain to get through the airports in transit. So if British Airways flights aren't available, then we will typically fly via Paris or fly via Madrid. But all of our trips typically start with a night in San Jose. We try and use this hotel. The lovely Bougainvillea Hotel has really big gardens full of birds and other wildlife. You'll start to see your first Costa Rican bird life here. The blue-grey tanager, it's quite a common tanager throughout the country, throughout actually Central America and in general. We're here in the American winter, so the birds that breed up in North America and Canada migrate down into Costa Rica to spend the winter, including this very colourful male Baltimore oriole, which is again quite commonly seen in the gardens of the hotel and elsewhere in the country. Not quite as colourful as the Baltimore oriole, but actually the clay-coloured thrush is a fascinating bird because it's Costa Rica's national bird. So you would have thought that perhaps in a country so blessed with colourful species of tanagers and trogons, quetzal, toucans, etc., they might pick one of those birds to be their national bird. But nope, they've chosen the clay-coloured thrush, and it might be drab to look at, but they have a beautiful song, and it's the song that is the reason why this bird was chosen. Being a member of the thrush family, they have a lovely melodic song like our blackbird and song thrush. The gardens are also home to a wealth of butterflies and other insects, including this attractive zebra longwing. On our northern tour, we start, say, with a night in San Jose, then we head up into the Talamanca Mountains to explore the cloud forests of Costa Rica. And from San Jose, we drop south along the Pan American Highway, which slowly climbs up to 8,000 feet up into the mountains, and you're enveloped in this wonderful cloud forest habitat, dripping and festooned with mosses and lichens, and it's a really very evocative habitat to explore. There are several lodges up in the Talamanca Mountains. The one we try to use, the one we generally book the most, is Cervegre Mountain Lodge. There's also El Trogon Lodge as well, which we use on a regular basis. And Cervegre is a lovely lodge. It sits at about 7,000 feet, close to a fast-flowing stream, very close to the cloud forest. The grounds have hummingbird feeders and bird tables. The rooms are very comfortable, twin-bedded, double-bedded rooms, all with ensuite facilities. And Cervegre is a great area for high-altitude birds. As I say, they have hummingbird feeders in the garden, and we'll also visit some hummingbird feeders up at a slightly higher altitude, up at about 8,000, 9,000 feet. There's a wide variety of hummingbirds to be enjoyed here. The jewel, one of the jewels of Costa Rica, and a real highlight of a wildlife trip to the country is the diversity of hummingbirds that you're likely to see. And you might see 30, 40 species of hummingbird in a 2-week trip. So these are fiery-throated hummingbirds here. You can't quite see their fiery throat in that photo, but this one shows it a little bit better. A wonderful iridescence when they catch the light at the right angle, this explosion of color from the throat down onto its breast. This is a common bird up at, say, about sort of 8,000 feet. And along with a variety of other species, such as the Talamanca hummingbird, used to be lumped within the sort of magnificent hummingbird family, but now it's been split out and given its own name, so Talamanca hummingbird. It's one of the larger species you'll see, but there's also small volcano hummingbirds, scintillant hummingbirds, green violeteer, mountain gems. There's a whole host of different colourful species to enjoy. And up in the forest here, we'll explore the cloud forests and the other habitats, looking for some of the high altitude species. Such as this long-tailed silky flycatcher, and the beautiful collared whitestart, which joins fast-moving feeding flocks that move through the canopy of the cloud forest. The birding in Costa Rica can be a bit challenging at times. You can be walking through forests, you won't see anything at all, and suddenly you'll hit a bird flock, and for the next 10-15 minutes there's species after species after species going through. The mixed flocks at high altitude include these collared whitestart, spangled-cheeked tanager, another species quite commonly seen, one of a variety of colourful tanagers that you'll see on this trip. The streak-headed wood creeper, acting a bit like a tree creeper stroke nuthatch. And if you're lucky, maybe something a little larger like emerald toucanet, which is another species of these high altitude forests. But the bird that everybody wants to see in Costa Rica, and the main reason we go up into the Talamanca Mountains, is the beautiful resplendent quetzal. Um, Arguably and often touted as one of the most beautiful birds in the world. It's not a difficult species to see. In fact, they sometimes nest in the gardens of Cervigre Lodge. This spectacular bird, and one that we certainly make a big effort to find. They favour the wild avocado trees. So if you can find a fruiting wild avocado tree within close distance of the lodge, you stand a very good chance of seeing this incredible bird. So hopefully, having seen the Resplendent Quetzal, we move to the Pacific lowlands down to Carrara National Park, which is edged by the Tarcoles River. Over 430 species of bird have been recorded here. This is lowland Pacific rainforest. We stay at a simple but comfortable lodge called Villa Lapis, and this lodge is the closest lodge to the trails and the wildlife of the region. I'm going to explore the Pacific lowlands rainforest, looking for some of the fabulous birds and other wildlife that we'll be seeing, that we hope to see along the way. So such as this long-tailed manakin and the bizarre looking boat-billed heron. So this is a nocturnal heron related to the night heron. So you normally see them during the day roosting in trees along the side of the river. We'll also go down to the Tarcoles Bridge over the Tarcoles River in the evening and watch the scarlet macaws flying into roost. And they're quite a rare bird. Well, they were quite a rare bird in Costa Rica, but the remaining populations in Carrara and down in Corcovado National Park have really flourished over the last recent years, and now they're commonly seen within the park. We'll also take a boat trip out into the mangrove forests, looking for roseate spoonbills and a host of other herons and egrets and water birds. There are lots of wintering and migrating waders in the region. Lesser yellowlegs. Here's one of a variety of species we hope to see when we take the boat trip out into the mangroves. And in the fringing vegetation, can look for the beautiful prothonotary warbler, another bird that breeds up in North America but winters down in Costa Rica. The smaller wildlife is also fascinating to look for and watch. The leafcutter ants here, these are abundant throughout the lowland forests in Costa Rica. They don't actually eat the leaves that they collect. These are fungus farmers, and so they take the leaves down to their underground nests, and on the leaves they grow a particular type of fungus which the ants eat. But we're also looking at in particular for army ant swarms when we're in the lowland rainforest, because the wide variety of ant pitters and ant shrikes and other species follow the army ant swarms, picking off the insects that are frightened out by the invading ants. And some fabulous butterflies as well, blue morpho and owl butterflies with this wonderful blue iridescent coloration. We'll take you out after dark on spotlighting walks, looking for birds such as spectacled owl and nightjars. And after a couple of nights in Carrara, we then head back inland again, up into the foothills of the Talamanca Mountains. We spend a couple of nights at Arenal Observatory Lodge, so at Arenal National Park, where we're based at a lovely lodge called Arenal Observatory Lodge on the edge of the volcano. And Arenal is a recent volcano, formed only about 7,000 years ago. It stopped erupting back in 2010, and it's clothed in mid-elevation forest. And the lodge is lodge puts out bird tables and fruits and other food on the tables, attracting in a wide variety of colourful and interesting species, such as this red-legged honey creeper, silver-throated tanager, and a few birds a little larger as well, such as this great curassow. The hummingbird, excuse me, the hummingbird feeders attract violet saberwing and a variety of other hummingbirds. These are known locally as violent saberwings for their tendency to chase away and bully other hummingbird species. And we'll be searching the cecropia trees nearby for the wonderful three-toed sloth, one of the mammalian highlights of a trip to Costa Rica. So then after spending a couple of nights exploring the mid-elevation forests around Aranao, we drop back down to the lowlands again, down to the lowlands on the Caribbean side of the country, and spend a few nights at Selva Verde Lodge. This lodge, I say, is in the Caribbean lowlands. It's on the edge of a quite fast-flowing stream. It's a very comfortable lodge next to its own area of primary rainforest. There are keel-billed toucans here, and hopefully you might be fortunate to see the amazing sunbittern along the edge of the river, named after the pattern of the setting sun, which is exposed on the primary feathers when the bird flies away. We'll also spend a day in the forests of La Selva, the Selva Biological Centre. It's run by the Organisation for Tropical Studies, and they conduct research on wildlife education and sustainable forestry. It's a large area of primary and secondary rainforest, home to over 460 species of bird, 100 species of mammal, and several thousand species of plant. Some really interesting birds here, like the military macaw, and some smaller creatures to look for as well, such as the colourful black and green poison dart frog and the strawberry poison dart frog as well. But again, a host of butterflies, reptiles, and other wildlife to enjoy as well. Now, if you venture back to Costa Rica in August, September, October time, you can go across to Tortuguero National Park and watch the turtles coming up on shore, the green turtles coming up on shore to lay their eggs. And a month or so later, the little baby turtles heading back down the beach and out to sea. We run another trip called Costa Rica's Raptor Spectacular for September, October, when huge numbers of migrating birds of prey are funneled down the Caribbean side of Costa Rica and are funneled by the mountain range into an ever narrower path until they cross the border into Panama. And over 3.5 million birds of prey move south during the autumn. Broadwings, Swainson's hawks, turkey vultures, swallowtail kites, and in the right conditions, you can get kettles over thousands and thousands of birds. And it really is as the tour name suggests, a spectacular sight. So that is our sort of northern tour in a nutshell, starting in San Jose, going down to the going up to the mountains, to the Pacific slope, to the Caribbean slope, and back to San Jose again. We run another group trip that focuses on the south of Costa Rica, and in particular visiting very famous Corcovado National Park. Corcovado is right down in the south of the country. On our group tour, we actually drive down there via Savegre and Talamanca Mountains. If you wanted to extend a tour or do a tailor-made trip down to the south, you can hop on to one of Costa Rica's little internal flights. And you can fly from San Jose down to Drake's Bay or Corfito if you don't want to do the drive. Corcovado National Park is a fabulous reserve. It covers over 424 square kilometers of the Osa Peninsula, and attracts the only remaining tract of primary rainforest left on Costa Rica's Pacific coastline. It was named as the most biologically intense place on Earth by National Geographic and is home to 500 species of trees, over 6,000 species of insect, probably many more that have been yet to be described, 140 species of mammal and 400 species of birds. It really is a fabulous area for wildlife. So clothed in this amazing forest, and in fact, even jaguar still in the heart of Corcovado, and the amazing harpy eagle as well. Although, sadly, the chances of seeing both of those top predators are very slim. So we take a boat trip down the Siripe River, and then out and around to Drake Bay Wilderness Resort, which is where we are based for our time in Corcovado. Wonderful resort, you can see backed by rainforest, right on the edge of the Pacific. Overhead, we have scarlet macaws flying, and a host of different birds in the forest. This is a great place for mammals as well. Mammals in Costa Rica can be a bit challenging. Of course, it's a forested country. So the mammals are often up in the canopy and difficult to spot, or they come out at night and nocturnal. But Corcovado is a good place for those interested in seeing a few mammals as well as the birds and other wildlife. Mantled howler monkeys often give you a dawn chorus as the sun comes up. There are white-faced capuchin monkeys in the trees. And it may be fortunate to see a northern tamandur as well, the small arboreal anteater. That's fairly widespread in the country, but can be difficult to see. You may be very lucky to see Baird's tapir. This is really the only place in Costa Rica where you stand a reasonable chance of seeing this large semi-aquatic mammal. The bird life is also abundant and diverse. White hawk are frequently seen. The skulking but very, very beautiful agami heron, as well as another species to look out for down here. Overhead, when you're out at sea, magnificent frigate birds are relatively common. And if you're down in the region in August, September time, then look out for humpback whales, which come down here during that time. There are plenty of reptiles. Spectacled caiman are another common species to look out for. There are more areas to explore, though, down in the south than just Corcovado National Park, and our southern Costa Rica trip will also take you to Esquina's Rainforest Lodge, which is in Manuel Antonio National Park on the edge, just on the edge of the Gofito Bay. It's a more simple accommodation than Drake Bay Wilderness Resort, but it puts you into some wonderful habitat. And the Esquinas, as a lot of the lodges do in Costa Rica, have their own network of footpaths radiating out from the lodge. So if you want to skip the group activities for a morning or an afternoon and go and do your own thing, you can wander the trails with your camera and enjoy the wildlife at a very leisurely pace. There are rufous-tailed jacamars here in the forest, and in the lodge grounds quite often see slaty-tailed trogon. We'll also take you out on night walks as well, and the Skinas operate night walks every evening where you go out spotlighting, looking not only for the birds and the mammals, but also some of the reptiles and amphibians too. And this is the time to go looking for the snakes and the frogs and the toads. Eyelash pit viper here, beautiful snake I've seen from time to time after dark. And one of the most familiar creatures of Costa Rica, and one they use, the Costa Rican Tourist Board use all over their promotional material, is the red-eyed tree frog. You can also spend, if you want to escape the heat of the lowlands for a while, you could head up into the hills by at a place called La Cruz, which is very close to the Panamanian border. And La Cruz is another of the biological centres, a bit similar to La Selva. 300 hectares of pre-montane wet forest, home to numerous species of bird and over 2,000 species of plant. There's a mix of habitats here from the the botanical gardens surrounding the lodge, dotted with fruiting trees and orchids, and some more mid-elevation primary and secondary forest. And the accommodation here is very nice as well. They put fruit out on their feeders every morning, attracting a wide variety of colourful birds, golden hooded tanager here and spectacled, sort of speckled tanager, blue-crowned motmot. And although it doesn't come into the feeders, when you're out in the forest bird watching, you stand a very good chance of seeing golden-winged warbler, another North American species that breed up to the north and winter down in Costa Rica. And there's a few mammals to be seen as well. Central American agouti are commonly seen scurrying around on the ground here. And for those interested in plants, the botanical gardens have an orchid collection, and there are plenty of orchids out in the forest as well. So the southern Costa Rica trip we run at a similar time of year, so, starting in November, and then going through January, February, March into April. Yeah, so that gives you a sort of overview of those two tours. We should have our 2026 Costa Rica dates finalized in the next few days or so. So it's a popular country, expected to fill up, but it's certainly well worth the visit. So I'll end my talk there with a sunset over a hummingbird. And if you have any questions on Costa Rica, then please do let me know, or pop them into the chat or Q&A box, and we'll answer them after the seminar's finished. And I will now pass you over to John, who will take you to Honduras. Thank you.
Perfect. Okay, thank you very much, Paul, for your talk on Costa Rica. So we're going to move on to Honduras, and we're going to focus on the lodge at Pico Bonito. So before we get started, I just want to take a moment to introduce myself. As Georgie said earlier, I'm John. I recently started working with Naturetrek in November last year. Prior to that, I'd actually been a Naturetrek client and had some fantastic wildlife experiences in places such as Ecuador, the Kruger National Park in South Africa, Finland, Poland on the lynx tour, where we managed to get European lynx on the very first night, which was a great experience. And then in December of last year, I was lucky enough to go to the lodge at Pico Bonito, and I also did the optional pre-tour extension into the Honduran highlands, which I'm also going to talk about as we go along. Okay, so as you can see from the map, Honduras, and Paul has already mentioned this, is also located on what's known as the Central American Isthmus, which is just a fancy way of saying it's part of a narrow strip of land with water on either side, which connects two larger bodies of land, and in this case that is the North and South American continents. Honduras is bordered by Nicaragua to the south, El Salvador to the west, and Guatemala to the north. And although it might look like it from the map, Honduras in fact doesn't share a land border with neighboring Belize. Honduras is located in the tropical climate zone and forms part of the Neotropics, which is the area comprising Central and South America, including the tropical southern part of Mexico and the Caribbean. This means that it enjoys a typically tropical climate. And understanding what this means in practical terms is really important in preparing to visit, especially if it's your first time in the tropics. The days are typically warm with some high humidity and the possibility of a very heavy shower at pretty much any time of the day. Average temperatures range from about 79 to 84 degrees Fahrenheit in the coastal lowlands. And it's a bit cooler in the highlands, so average temperatures will range between 61 and 75 degrees Fahrenheit there. It's probably also worth saying at this point that your guides will generally know what sort of weather to expect day to day, and will therefore advise you to either bring waterproofs or to be in shorts, depending on what the forecast is. And if necessary, the guides will also change your itinerary accordingly. So, for example, we were due to go to the Cuero y Salado Wildlife Refuge midweek, but the weather, which can be incredibly localized, wasn't looking great for the wildlife refuge, and would therefore have had a significant impact on the range and number of species we saw. So we swapped around the activities on our itinerary, delayed our visit until the Friday, and had a fantastic time with a wonderful array of different species on show, which we simply wouldn't have seen if we'd stuck to the original plan. In terms of time zone, mainland Honduras is on Central Standard Time, so it's 6 hours behind Greenwich Mean Time. As it's near the equator, you can expect roughly 12 hours of daylight each day. It's generally dark by about 6:30 in the evening. It's usually lighter for longer on the coast, which is where Pico Bonito is located. And depending on weather, it can get darker earlier in the highlands at around 5 to 5:30. So how do you get to Honduras from the UK? There are no direct flights from the UK to Honduras, so group tours will leave Heathrow and transit through the US, typically either via Miami or via Houston, and arrive here at the regional airport of San Pedro Sula. From there, you will transit in a minibus to the lodge at Pico Bonito, and that is a journey of approximately 3.5 hours by road. Flight time from the UK to the US is approximately 9 to 10 hours on the outbound flight, but slightly quicker coming back. You'll overnight in the US, and then your flight time from the US down to Honduras is about 2 hours 20 minutes from Miami and around 2 hours 45 minutes from Houston. All of your road journeys will be taken in a comfortable 15-seater minibus with aircon. So although some of the roads in Honduras aren't the best, they do tend to be considerably better in the coastal areas than in the highlands. And your driver is an experienced driver and will be doing his very best or her very best at avoiding all the potholes. So when is the best time to go? Well, typically our departures range from early November through to the end of February. The reason we do this is because it avoids the rainy season, which typically runs from June through to the end of October. It's also worth noting that over the winter period, and Paul has already mentioned this in his talk about Costa Rica, enormous numbers of North American migrant bird species funnel down the isthmus to their wintering grounds in Central America and the northern end of South America. So it's a fabulous time to see some great North American species, as well as all the resident bird, mammal, and other species. I personally loved being away somewhere completely different at Christmas, but if family or other commitments don't allow you to be away then, early to mid-Feb is also a great time to be in Honduras, and that coincides with the start of the breeding season. And again, otherwise difficult birds to see can be quite showy because they're busy establishing territories and beginning the search for a mate. Okay, moving on to the accommodation. This is what awaits you in Honduras, the fabulous lodge at Pico Bonito. So it's an award-winning spa lodge set in the heart of 250,000-acre Pico Bonito National Park. And it has its own 400-acre reserve dominated by lowland tropical wet forest. What you can see here is the main entrance to the lodge, which has a newly renovated restaurant, a good-sized swimming pool and spa facilities, and chalet-style accommodation set around the beautiful landscape gardens. There are a number of well-marked trails that you can explore at your leisure, although it's best to go with your guide if you want to venture further, and guided walks around Pico Bonito will be a key part of your itinerary. Okay, this is the view from the veranda, where we can also see here the dining area outside, and this is where you are most likely to take all of your meals. There is extensive inside space if you prefer, which I will show you in a moment. The mountain that you can see in the background here is Pico Bonito itself, after which the park is named. And in Spanish, this means beautiful peak. And I'm sure you'll agree this is a stunning view to be greeted with at the start and end of every day. A great spot for a sundowner and to discuss the sightings of the day before, during, and after your meals. Okay, this is the inside of the lodge's restaurant. As I say, you can sit inside if you prefer, but when I was there in December, our group were always sat outside, and outside is where you're likely to go through checklists and discuss plans for the next day. There's an a la carte menu to choose from, serving typical Mesoamerican, so that's Middle American cuisine. It includes things like chicken, pork, beef, fresh seafood, locally grown herbs and vegetables. There are also vegetarian and vegan options available. And house specialties include a coconut milk curry, seafood soup, and medallions of beef dusted with coffee and cacao. Okay, this is one of the standard cabins, which comes equipped with double beds, large double beds, large ceiling fans, which you probably won't need because it's quite cool at night, and ensuite bathroom, toilet, and shower facilities. The laundry service at the lodge is excellent, and I would encourage you to pack light if you can and try and make use of the service. So, you know, I used it a number of times and items were returned the same day, pressed and folded, which is a really great backup if you've been on a muddy hike or got caught in a rain shower in your favorite clothes and you want them cleaned quickly. There are also a number of limited number of superior cabins available at a supplemental cost if you're interested. Okay, so onto the wildlife. One of the wonderful things about Honduras is that it is largely unspoiled. And what I mean by that is that it has not yet become saturated by tourism like some other sort of more fashionable destinations. And what this means in practical terms is that you are likely to be the only wildlife group in any given region, and possibly even the entire country on any given day. This means long periods of wildlife watching without interruption, which is absolute bliss, I must say. And it will more often than not be just you, your guide, and the magnificent surroundings with its wildlife. The wildlife is not habituated, and therefore what you see is truly wild. So your first day at Pico Bonito will probably be spent orientating your way around the lodge grounds on the network of trails that run throughout the park. There are several species of hummingbird that regularly visit the nectar feeders, including the crowned wood nymph, which you can see here, the violet saberwing, the purple-crowned fairy, long-billed hermit, rufous-tailed hummingbird, and white-necked Jacobin. So obviously you can take a leisurely morning or evening if you wish, just sitting on the veranda admiring a range of bird species that come in at close quarters. Your walks around the grounds of Pico Bonito initially will include a visit to Toucan Tower, and that is located 200 meters from the lodge center. And this offers views from an elevated ridge which overlooks the Rio Coloradito and the surrounding forested slopes, which are covered in tropical, secondary, and gallery forest, as well as some areas of plantation. So this will probably be your first opportunity to look for the lovely Caatinga, with some patients, you should see, we were lucky enough to see both male and female. Lovely Cotinga tend to be more prominent. So that was what we saw to start with, but with some patience and some good observation. We also got a feeding flock of lovely male Cotinga, and I think for me it's one of those birds which perhaps you don't quite understand the significance of when you and just how appealing they are when you look at them in a book, but when you see them in real life with this striking red breast and blue coloration all over, you can really appreciate why actually this was has been a revered bird in Central America. You should also begin to see a profusion of species like woodpeckers, flycatchers, trogons, wood creepers, honey creepers, manakins, parrots, arasaris, and toucans. All of these species are possible within the grounds of Pico Bonito and sort of within spitting distance of the main accommodation. It is worth saying at this point that this is not exclusively a bird tour. You are looking out for birds, but also mammals, reptiles, insects, and amphibians. It's just that particularly in the tropics, birds are the most abundant taxa that you will see. But we're going to move on and see and have a quick look at other possible sightings as well. So in terms of mammals, we regularly came across a family party of white-faced capuchin in our walks around Pico Bonito, as well as the species Paul mentioned earlier, the Central American agouti, which is a small to medium-sized rodent which often darted across the lodge lawns. There are also other larger mammal species at Pico Bonito Lodge, but these tend to be more, much more elusive or nocturnal or both. But you really do get a sense when you're there that wildlife, big and small, is around you all of the time. And one of the ways you pick up that is that there are a series of camera traps around the lodge perimeter, and you can actually go into the reception area and view the footage. And the camera traps have captured species such as ocelot, puma, even jaguar walking the trails. In fact, an ocelot did once come, not when we were there, but did come and park itself on the hotel lawn early one evening, to the amazement of all who were there. But as I say, this is an extremely rare occurrence. Okay, as well as walks during the day, there are night walks around Pico Bonito. Target bird species during these walks will be birds such as great patoo and Guatemalan screech owl, as well as many other reptiles and amphibians that might be active. The lodge has its own frog pond, where there's a healthy population of red-eyed tree frog. And if you're interested in moth trapping, speak to your guide, and that is something that can potentially be arranged. So on both the Highlands Extension Tour and at Pico Bonito, the guides were willing to give up their free time after they've done the night walks to go spotlighting for mammals and herps. But I must emphasize that this is entirely at their discretion and in their free time, so we can't guarantee this. During the night walk on the Highlands Extension Tour, we came across an opossum, as well as two species that you can see now. The species on the left is the smooth helmeted iguana, and the snake on the right is the blunt-head tree snake. We also had Jamaican fruit bat in the Highlands, so there's great opportunities to add to your day sightings if the guides are willing. Okay, as well as the wildlife that the guides will find for you, there's plenty of wildlife that you can find yourself. These include a range of butterflies that were easily seen on the feeders in the middle of the lodge lawn, the feeders were also visited by bird species such as collared aracari. My personal favourite around the lodge were the giant blue morpho and the butterfly that you can see in the middle here, which is the owl or owl-eyed butterfly. Both the blue morpho and the owl-eyed butterfly are regularly seen sort of lazily flapping their way around the lodge. And if one comes towards you, you need to duck out of the way. They are that big. Some of the other butterflies that I just loved because of the names included pink cattle heart, the small spotted flasher, the Julia longwing, the Guatemalan cracker, and possibly the best of the lot, the pointer sister. In total, we saw about 50 to 60 species of butterfly during our stay at Pico Bonito and exploring the surrounding area. So if that's your thing, they are definitely well worth keeping an eye out for. Just a quick word on the guides and how best to use them. Your guides are the experts in terms of knowing what the very best habitats to visit, the times of day that will be most productive, and also the likely behavior patterns of the species you're trying to see. If it's going to be a fleeting look at a particular species, they will tell you in advance, and you need to be ready to go in looking through the scope or your binoculars. And if it's likely to be a more prolonged view, but requires absolute silence beforehand, they will say so. So one of Naturetrek's core principles is that we place you with the very best guides available in that country or that region. And my advice would be to stick to your guides as closely as possible when you are moving around a group and listen to what they're telling you. It really does make a huge difference in terms of what you're likely to see. And sometimes the birding and wildlife spotting can come incredibly thick and fast. So you really need to be kind of on your toes and as I say, listening to your guides as closely as possible. At Pico Bonito, you'll have two guides and they'll work in tandem to do their very best to ensure that everyone in the group sees and hears whatever you're looking for. On the December tour that I was part of, we were a group of 13, which is quite large, but our guides did a brilliant job of making sure that we saw everything possible. Okay, as well as wildlife spotting in and around Pico Bonito, you'll venture out by road to some reserves and some locations in the local area. The longest drive that you'll do is about 2.5 hours each way from Pico Bonito down to the River Aguan Valley and the area around Olanchito. This is primarily to look for Honduras's only endemic bird, which is a species of hummingbird known as the Honduran emerald. If you do the pre-extension tour, you'll also have a chance at the Honduran emerald in the highlands, but in the lowlands, it can be found in a small area of tropical dry thorn forest. This is actually located on an army base and therefore comes with some ready-made protection from general disturbance, which gives you an excellent chance of seeing it. We actually saw two individuals on our visit. The two images you can see here of the same bird, but the picture on the right shows the iridescence of the bird's gorget, the throat patch when it's hit by the sunlight. So this is a special bird and it's well worth the effort to try and find it. The same day we'd stopped in an area which our guide told us was really good for lesser roadrunner, although they could be really elusive. And the last time that he tried to locate them, it took him nearly 2 hours. We got incredibly lucky because we spotted two birds by the roadside from our minibus, so it took no time at all, and that was another great tick for the day. Okay, one of my favourite days of the whole trip was our visit to the Cuero y Salado Wildlife Refuge, which is a 35,000 acre site of rivers, lagoons, mangrove and forest right on the Caribbean coast of Honduras, but only an hour's drive from Pico Bonito. This is a place that has a really wide range of species, possibly partly due to the diversity of habitat. Depending on the size of the group, you'll probably board one of two boats, each with one of your two guides, and slowly cruise the channels looking for wildlife. Possible bird species include agami heron, boat-billed heron, which we can see here, bare-throated tiger heron, bat falcon, laughing falcon, and lesser yellow-headed vulture. You'll almost certainly see yellow-crowned night heron and ringed kingfisher. We also saw lesser nighthawk and lineated woodpecker. Two of the really special birds that you'll spend time looking for are sungrebe, and again, one of my personal favourites, russet-naped woodrail. We were lucky enough to see both on our visit, as well as a range of other species: black and mantled howler monkey, long-nosed bat, raccoon, black caiman, and American crocodile. So it really is a special place to visit. An optional day trip that you could do from Pico Bonito is to the Caia Cachinos, which is a collection of 15 little barrier reef islets on the Caribbean side of Honduras. Now, on this day, you might have a difficult choice to make, because the rest of the group will do a longer hike up into the cloud forest around Pico Bonito, and one of the key species they'll be looking for is toady motmot, which the group that went got. Myself and two other guests opted for the excursion to Caia's Cachinos, primarily to see the pink boa constrictors. And we can see one of those here on the left. Now, just in terms of managing expectation, I will say that part of the day will be spent snorkeling. But if you go primarily for that, then you really need to have a discussion with the people that are going with you, because the best coral reef is in deeper water, which you will be able to access. But firstly, you'll need consensus among your group that that's what you are going to do, and you'll also need to be a competent snorkeler, as you will be in open water. I went on this excursion, and I went mainly for the pink boas, which we found. So what you can see here is a juvenile, and again, just a word of warning. I would say that if your trip to Caia's Cachinos coincides with the weekend, it's also worth bearing in mind that the islands have other visitors, and some of them do pick up the adult boas for selfies, and the adults promptly then disappear into the forest, leaving just the juveniles behind. But if you do want to see a pink boa, then you've got a very, very good chance of seeing a juvenile at the very least. We did also see a couple of other bird species that you won't get elsewhere. Those included the Yucatan vireo and Cannevet's emerald. And we did also come across what you can see here on the right, a juvenile masked booby, which we spotted on our way out to the island, and that is really uncommon for the area, and therefore that was a real highlight as well. Okay, and just a quick final word on the pre-tour extension. This is really worth doing. So this is the pre-tour extension, 4-day extension up into the highlands of into the highlands of Honduras. It's particularly worth doing if you are targeting some key bird species which are next to impossible elsewhere at sort of lower elevations. One bird that is possible is the Honduran emerald, and that's possible in both the highlands and the lowlands. But the three key species of the highlands really are the resplendent quetzal, the keel-billed motmot, and the wine-throated hummingbird. You'll bird from 2 locations in the highlands. Your first accommodation will be the rustic Gloriales Lodge, and then the well-established and much bigger Panacam Lodge. And you will also, during your time in the Highland on the extension, you'll visit the Tigre National Park, probably for 2 days running, a full day, and then go back the following morning to look for any other species that you've missed. And you'll also bird around Lake Yajoa for a whole range of wetland species. And in terms of numbers, that was probably one of our most productive days. We did see between 70 and 80 bird species. So the extension tour is well worth considering. Just bear in mind you do need to be a committed birder and want to see those target species, because that's primarily what you're going to be focusing on. We were lucky enough to see all of these species on our pre-extension tour, so that was really good. Okay, right, that concludes my talk on Honduras, the lodge at Pico Bonito. So I'm now going to hand back to Georgie before we move on to Q&A.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much, John and Paul. A couple of fantastic talks there. I think you'll agree. You've certainly inspired me and brightened up this evening. So we've got a few questions that have come in. So thank you, everyone. Do keep popping them in there and we'll go through them as we go. First of all, for you, Paul, I think this could be quite a tricky one, actually. Stephen Montague has asked, how would you be able to orientate guests who know nothing about the forest species in Costa Rica? So, for example, what's as common as a house sparrow for British birders or as rare as a honey buzzard, for example? I imagine it's partly dependent on exactly where you are in Costa Rica. With that amount of altitudinal variation and everything else, it's probably quite
Yeah.
difficult to say. But can you give us any idea on that?
Well, there are some very common birds like blue-grey tanager is a very colourful but common species out there. The clay-coloured thrush, I mean, is also common. Amongst the hummingbirds, you've got rufous-tailed hummingbird, which is a common little bird. But it's such a huge diversity of species out there. You're seeing birds all the time in the forests, and invariably you're quite often seeing different ones because the diversity is very high, but the actual density of a particular species can be quite low. But yeah, when you're on the coast, there are common birds like magnificent frigate bird. So yeah, it's like over here, you've got your common species and you've got your rarer ones.
Great, thanks, Paul. That's really helpful. And another question here from Andrew Burke. If you wanted to do more than one tour in Costa Rica, is there a logical or recommended order to do the trips in, and are there different extensions available?
Well, I guess probably the one to go for if you've never been to Costa Rica before is the northern Costa Rica trip. That gives you a good cross section of different habitats and altitudes, and that one can easily be extended either to places like Corcovado National Park down in the south, or maybe across the Tortuguero National Park on the Caribbean side. For those who have been to Costa Rica, you go down to the south and explore again Corcovado, Esquinas, and the Cruce. But it really doesn't matter where you go in Costa Rica. The diversity of wildlife there is so high. You're going to have a great time. But I think if you've never been there before, I'd probably go initially for the northern trip. And yeah, say there's lots of areas to extend to.
And don't forget, if you want to do a completely all-encompassing trip, you could always go tailor-made.
Very true.
And I think you did briefly touch on this, 2026 Costa Rica bookings. I know that it does book up quickly, so when will people be able to log on and do that?
I'm hoping by the end of this month, in 10 days or so, I've got the dates sorted. I just need to just to finalize the prices. So hopefully end of the month, early next month, I'll have all 2026 dates up online and ready to book. If you're particularly keen on making sure you get a space on a 2026 date, just drop me an email and I can hold you a space and then let you know once dates and once prices are confirmed.
Thanks very much. And this one from Ian Taylor, issues with optics, with cameras and binoculars, with the various rainforest, cloud forest. Is it a problem for optics? Is it something that we need to be aware of? You've got any advice on that?
Worth trying to keep your optics always as dry as possible. It's very humid out in Costa Rica. So yeah, you certainly do need to be careful just to make sure they stay dry. Even in the dry season, in the rainforest, you know, it's still invariably going to rain from time to time. So make sure you've got rain guards for your binoculars. Maybe a small umbrella are useful out in Costa Rica if you get a sudden short, sharp rain shower. But yeah, certainly take care of them, because in hot and humid conditions it can do bad things to binoculars if you're not careful.
Great advice, thank you. And on a similar kind of vein there, temperature and humidity range sort of within the dry season, but in Costa Rica between the sort of lowlands and highlands, what kind of range are we talking about there?
In the lowlands, it's pretty hot and humid, so it is very, very humid. Temperatures, I don't know, in the upper 20s, low 30s, but the humidity is very high. As you go up in altitude, the humidity decreases, temperature decreases. So up and around sort of Sevegre, It can be quite chilly in the mornings. They can sometimes have frost in the mornings, and you need to wear a fleece. But during the middle of the day, it's pleasantly warm. So we try and alternate between time in the lowlands and then a bit of time up in the highlands, just to give you a little bit of respite from the heat. But yeah, hot and humid down low, pleasantly warm, and a bit less humid as you go up.
Great, thanks, Paul. And probably this one affects both countries, actually. Effects of climate change. Are we seeing sort of any major differences in the sort of fauna and flora that we're seeing in the weather patterns, depending on the trips? Have we had to sort of change our seasons at all there yet, or?
Not as yet. Still, I'm sure the weather is less predictable these days than it used to be. But the rainy season still typically starts late April into May, runs through to October, November time. Yeah, I suspect there has been some sort of change over the years, but I've not noticed it to any great degree myself as yet.
Yeah, I think another thing to bear in mind there is that obviously, climate change may have an impact on the place that the locations that species are found, but your guides will know. So a key aspect of birding and wildlife spotting in the tropics is the elevation that you operate at. So your guides will have the up-to-date information as to where species are. So if a species has moved in terms of its location and either up or down in elevation, depending on changing weather patterns, then they will know that, and they will know where to go and give you the best opportunity to see what you're looking for.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Brilliant, thank you. And the age-old question that we've got here, are leeches a problem in Costa Rica, but also potentially for Honduras as well? I imagine it'd be interesting to know for both.
No, I don't think leeches are a problem in Costa Rica from memory. I don't remember there being any. The chiggers tend to be more of a problem. These are little insects that can cause a rash and itching on the skin, if you're not careful. But I've never found leeches to be a problem in anywhere really in the America. They're more of a problem in Southeast and East Asia.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, and I think the same is true of Honduras. We didn't have any problems with leeches at all. And Honduras is not designated as a mosquito area. So, I mean, you are recommended to take a good insect repellent, typically with sort of 50% DEET. But that is to kind of stave off the biting insects rather than mosquitoes. And as I say, leeches just weren't a problem for our group at all.
Very good to know, thank you. And a question again for somebody has asked about the trekking in Costa Rica and the underfoot standards. Is there a way that you can sort of relate that to UK footpaths and possibly RSP reserves, Paul, about Costa Rica? I don't know if that's.
It's not difficult walking. It's undulating. You're going up and down the footpaths. Some of the footpaths are wide and flat and a bit RSPB reserve-ish. Others are narrower and crisscross with roots and a bit muddy in places. We're taking all of our walks at a pretty slow pace, stopping and looking and watching the birds as we go. So yeah, they're not difficult. Just be prepared that some of the paths are undulating a little bit up and down. You've got to watch your footing. So good walking shoes or walking boots would suffice. But the thing to remember is the vast majority of Naturetrek clients tend to be around sort of 55 to 75 sort of age. So we're not going to be gallivanting up and down mountains, and the trips are taken at a leisurely pace.
Right, and there's no sort of trips that you would really recommend, because we do offer a few different in Costa Rica, don't we? There's none that are sort of easier than others or different terrain-wise. They're all much.
I would say all of our Costa Rica trips are very similar in terms of their difficultiness. I say they're mostly pretty excuse me, pretty easy really.
Great, lovely. And sort of similar question for you, John, about the sort of terrain and the walking difficulty in Honduras.
Yeah, so we've graded the walks for the Pico Bonito tour grade A, which is our sort of easiest level of walking. Probably the most difficult day was in terms of gradient was actually on the pre-extension tour, because that was where we were in La Tigra National Park, and we went up in elevation about 500 meters. So, that's quite a long time spent going up and then coming down again. But in terms of, sort of general walking around the lodge at Pico Bonito, there's a series of well-established trails. So you're on footpaths. I mean, they are stony. Again, as Paul said, a good stout pair of walking boots will do you proud for the whole tour. And the walks aren't particularly challenging in terms of their difficulty. And obviously, your guides, if you just need to speak to your guides, and they'll stop regularly, if you need to stop and take a water break or whatever. So yeah, no, the walking was not onerous really around Pico Bonito at all.
No, thank you. And a common theme that's come up with a couple of people here, John, the security situation in Honduras. As with much of Central America, it tends to get a bit of a bad rap.
Yeah.
What was it like when you were there? You feel safe and able to travel everywhere?
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, I think this is a really interesting and important question. I think there are two elements to it, really. I mean, there is how safe is a country in practical terms, and then how safe do you feel in that country? So, obviously, Naturetrek is not going to send anyone anywhere which is unsafe. We look closely and monitor closely the advice that's coming out of the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office. And currently, I mean, I looked on it again today, there are no advisories in place for Honduras. So in practical terms, it's safe. And yeah, as I say, a place is sometimes as safe as you feel it to be. We passed through the capital. I would say that we were warmly welcomed everywhere we went. I felt as safe as I do at home in the UK. And I think just the usual precautions that, you wouldn't necessarily wander around a town in the UK, waving personal items around, well, you wouldn't do that anywhere else either. But no, I felt incredibly safe. My son actually came with me on the tour, and I wouldn't have taken him anywhere that, I wasn't completely comfortable about him being. So yeah, we had a warm welcome. People love the fact that you are visiting their country, and they treat you as honoured guests, and that's so it's a really nice experience from that point of view.
Lovely to hear, thank you. And hopefully a nice easy one. Are there single rooms at Pico Bonito? And are there a supplement for those, do you know?
Yeah, that's a good question. So within our group, we did have, I think, 2 single travellers. So yes, there are single rooms available. They will be subject to a single room supplement. But yes, you can stay if you are a solo traveller.
Fantastic, thank you. And just sort of a general one for both of you, really. I know that feeders are used a lot in a lot of Central Americas. Do you sort of have an opinion on that use, and do you think it's being used appropriately at the lodges?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Again, I mean, I mentioned in my talk, I referred to the feeders at Pico Bonito. That they don't have a huge abundance. There's sort of 5 or 6. And what I would say is that hummingbirds have to feed an awful lot in order to sort of maintain their metabolism. So as you would put food out at home for a bird to support that bird, then they do the same. In terms of photography, I understand that not everybody wants to photograph the bird on a plastic feeder, and all I would say is you just require a little patience. There's plenty of sort of trees and with branches and twigs available, which the hummingbirds will perch from. They'll often have a favoured perch, and they'll fly down from that onto the feeders. So you just need to stand. You know, if you're wanting to just view them in more sort of natural habitat, or you want to take a photograph, just a little bit of patience, and they'll perch up for you, and you'll get a fantastic view.
In Costa Rica, the lodges with feeders will also often have hummingbird friendly flowers planted in the garden as well. So the hummers tend to go from the feeders to the flowers and back and forth. So I don't think it's really impacting on the health of the birds, and the bird tables. They're putting out fresh fruit for the tanagers and arasaris, etc. So again, pretty natural food for them.
Thank you. And Paul, another one for you. We've got somebody who wants, for a once in a lifetime trip, would you do northern or southern Costa Rica? If you could only go once, which one would you go for?
Um, Difficult. I would probably go again, if you've not been there before. Go to the north. The north gives you everything really you want to see in Costa Rica. The hummingbirds and the tanagers and the quetzals, some fabulous scenery, and some nice lodges. Yeah, I think if you went down to the south, you'd have an absolutely fabulous time as well. But if I had to choose, probably do the northern circuit.
I guess it kind of depends what you're looking for as well, isn't it? If you're more interested in mammals, I would say it'd be a shame to miss out on Corcovado,
Yeah,
perhaps. So
Corcovado for the mammals, definitely.
yeah,
Yeah,
but then you could do
yeah.
that as an extension to the northern tour. So yeah, there are so many different options. I'd agree. Great. And John, another one for you. You did briefly mention wildlife photography when we were just talking about the feeders there.
Yeah.
Do you think it's generally a good destination for photography? Would you recommend it?
Yeah, I would highly recommend it. I mean, I'm a wildlife photographer, strictly amateur wildlife photographer myself. The one thing I didn't share in my talk was that so I have a telephoto lens, and it broke on day 3. So the picture that I showed you of the wine-throated hummingbird was a picture that I took, and that was actually the last um, bird I took with my telephoto lens. So I obviously tried not to worry too much about that. I had actually got a backup lens as well, so I had a macro lens, and I switched into that. And you know, there was some fantastic insect species, some fantastic butterflies, for example. You know, sort of easily available. You don't need a guide for those. You can just you know, take 20 minutes before or after dinner and go and find your own things to look at and to photograph. So it is excellent. And there are a profusion of birds that are visiting the lodge regularly. So yeah, you just need camera in hand and walk about. You will find stuff, and you'll find species to take photographs of.
Fantastic, thank you. And just another one on Honduras, the guides. Are they good guides, experienced guides at sort of similar levels to the rest of Central America, or how did you find that?
Yeah, they were superb actually. They were superb. We had two different guides, so one for the Highlands, and we actually had 2 with us at Pico Benito. So Alex Alvarado guided us in the Highlands. He's a highly experienced and recognized, sort of internationally recognized guide, and yeah, he was excellent. The group that was at Pico Benito was sort of led by Olbin. If you go on eBird, you'll find that Olbin is sort of the top birder for Honduras for 2024. He's 31. He's very enthusiastic, and he worked really well. I mean, as I say, we were a large group, um, and he worked really well in tandem with the other guide, Kelvin, in making sure that everyone saw everything, which I think is, you know, really important in terms of you know, your experience with guides. So yeah, they were as good as anywhere else I've been.
Fantastic, thanks, John. And a final one for both of you: vaccinations required for either country. Are they yeah, it's pretty easy, or is there we need to take a lot of things?
Straightforward really for Costa Rica, just your standard typhoids and hepatitis A. You don't need malaria tabs. Only one really corner of Costa Rica which you don't visit on our tours, where you need to take malaria tablets. But yeah, be cautious of insects, mosquitoes in Costa Rica, so wear repellent and long sleeves in the evening because there is dengue fever and other potential issues out there. But in terms of jabs, there's not that many. We always recommend visiting your travel nurse or doctor beforehand just to get the latest recommendation. But there's normally nothing out of the ordinary for Costa Rica.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would mirror that for Honduras as well. I think that the situation is exactly the same. And if you are, you've traveled regularly, then you'll probably be covered. I didn't need any extra vaccinations to go to Honduras because I've been to places like Ecuador, but they again are the standard. And yeah, as I said before, it's not a malarial country, so you won't need to take anti-malarials, just good insect spray.
Fantastic, thank you. And Stephen Davies just popped in with just one more there, Paul. Catering in Costa Rica. I think it's probably like to say if you've got dietary requirements. Yep, dietary sensitivities. There we go. How does that work? Is that okay, or do they
They're pretty good really, because they're quite used to catering for Western diets. So we can cater certainly for vegetarian. We've had people who are gluten free on our trips. So as long as we get enough warning far enough in advance, we can let our local partners in Costa Rica know, and then they will let the hotels know. But typically, it's really not a problem to cater for dietary needs in Costa Rica.
Fantastic, thank you. And thanks to you both again for some fantastic presentations there. I think that takes us just about to the end of our questions. But if anybody's got any other budding questions or they'd like to talk to any of us, then do give the office a ring tomorrow or at any other time, or just drop us an email. As mentioned previously, we'll be heading to Winchester and London later this week for our in-person roadshows, but we will be coming to you online again for the next few weeks. So do look up the schedule for that, and hopefully we can inspire you a bit more there. But I think that should be just about it for this evening. So thanks, team, and thanks everyone for joining us.
Thank you
Very welcome.
very much. And
Thanks very much, everyone.
good night, everybody.
Thank you. Good night. Bye-bye.